Hello, everyone, and welcome to your asynchronous lesson. Today, we're going to talk about the immune system, and I chose that because I feel like the book was very short on the immune system. And I think it's a very big part of our job as paramedics, as all the allergic reactions are directly related to the immune system. You'll have to bear with me because this is the first time that I've ever done one of these. So if I stumble over some words or you notice some editing in the final version, please bear with me. Hopefully you've watched both videos that are on the D2L. So I think that this is important. I do want to say that the immune system is very complicated, and we need to know just the basics, and that's what I'm going to try to cover today. So I'm going to try to share my screen and go over the PowerPoint, and then I'll be back at the end. So today our learning objectives are to differentiate between a pathogen, an antigen, an antibody, and an allergen. Identify 3 lines of defense in the immune system. Identify 3 body parts from which initial stage prevention of infection. Identify 2 characteristics of the secondary line of defense. Identify 2 cells specific to the 3rd line of defense, and differentiate between a local reaction and a systemic allergic reaction. So first, I want to just start with some terminology. These are things that you will need to know as a paramedic. A pathogen. A pathogen is a bacteria, virus, or fungi, or any other microorganism that can cause disease in the human body. Let me put this on the present mode. An antigen is a toxin or foreign substance that enters the body, which induces an immune response in the body, especially in the production of antibodies. And antibodies are a protein produced in response and counteracting a specific antigen. Antibodies combine chemically with substances which have been recognized by the body as alien, such as bacteria, viruses, and foreign substances in the blood. An allergen. The difference between a pathogen and an allergen is allergens are specific to that person. Some people might be sensitive to something and other people not. That's the difference between an allergen and a pathogen. And the last term I want you to be familiar with is an autoimmune disease. This is more in pathology than it is in physiology, but an autoimmune disease is a disease in which the body's own immune system destroys or attacks its own tissues. All right, so let's start off with the first line of defense. The first line of defense is the things that keep pathogens from entering the body, and they can be physical, chemical, or biological. And by and large, your skin is the biggest first line of defense. But you have other systems that are part of the first line defense. As you can see in the slide, mucus and cilia. And you have specific physical attributes such as the turbinates in your nose that are designed so that the air flows back and forth and can be better filtered by the cilia and the mucus. You have the first line of defense at any opening in the body. That would mean eyes, nose, ears, your anus. The first line of defense is also through your entire digestive system. So anything that you eat could be chemically, biologically, or physically blocked from entering the bloodstream. That's the first line of defense. So let's talk about white blood cells. White blood cells are the catalyst of your immune system. White blood cells even though they're everywhere, are only about 0.1% of the formed elements in your blood. Yet they're responsible for disease prevention and eradication. White blood cells are manufactured in the bone marrow from the same cell producing, or the same stem cell producing red blood cells. The thymus is a gland that's located in your chest under your sternum. And this controls and regulates the distribution of all your white blood cells. The one thing unique about white blood cells that red blood cells don't do is they can leave the circulatory system to fight infection and process in a process called diapedesis. They actually move from the blood circulation out into the extracellular tissues to remove infection. All right, so let's get into the immune system itself. Starts at the second line of defense, which is a non-specific or innate response. That means that it does this to any pathogen that enters the body, and it's not specific to which type it is. This begins with mast cells. Mast cells can release histamines and cause an inflammatory response, and they also increase the permeability of blood vessels. So there's actually capillary leakage, and the mast cells are the cells that begin this process of the immune system. Once they do this, there's another type of cell that follows, the macrophage cell. The mast cells basically cause the swelling and vasodilation so that these macrophages can get through the circulatory system and gain access to the pathogen. And then the second part of the non-specific response is when these macrophages engulf and digest a pathogen. So basically, the mast cells allow the macrophages to get where they need to go. And they do this by releasing histamines, causing vasodilation, and causing the permeability of the area around the infected area to change. There's also the complement system. Now, this can work with both the specific or non-specific response systems. And essentially, what that does is it calls in the type of cells that are needed. If you remember, there's lots of different types of white blood cells. Some of them, cause fever. Some of them cause vasodilation. Some of them are made to kill and destroy pathogens within the body. The complement system works with both the specific and non-specific responses. The third level is the specific or adaptive immune system, an adapted response. So this begins with what's called dendritic cells. And these dendritic cells come in, and they come from the response, what I was talking about in the last slide, and they come in. And what they do is they engulf the pathogen, but instead of destroying it, they essentially bring it back to the lymphatic system. And this is called a cell-mediated response. Now, this adaptive system, or this mediated system, has two phases. It has the cytotoxic, which is cell toxic, T cells, and they destroy the pathogen. They do this by injecting the pathogen with a protein called perforin, and this causes apoptosis. And if you remember back to if you remember medical terminology, that means that it basically self-destructs the cell. So that's the adapted response. And then the humoral response is when these dendritic cells basically dissect the pathogen, bring it back to the lymphatic system in the lymph nodes. And within there, there's two things. There's the helper T cells, which essentially they make a blueprint of the pathogen, and the B cells create the antibodies. So all in all, that's the immune system. So what do you have to know? You have to know that there's 3 levels. You have to know that the mast cells are what cause the inflammatory response. You have to know that the macrophages are what destroy the cells. You have to know that the complement system brings in whatever cell is needed, that the dendritic cells help make copies of the pathogen so that the humoral cells can create the antibodies. And remember, T cells kill the cells, B cells build the antibodies. So what exactly are antibodies? Well, they're described as Y-shaped proteins having a specific antigen binding area. They're found in blood, mucus, saliva, breast milk, and more areas of the body. They're even in the mouth and the digestive system. And there are many, many classes of antibodies. Specifically, the IgE antibodies, they protect against parasites, but they're the ones that create most of your allergic reactions. The other thing that you have to know is that antibodies are specific to a single antigen. So the cell may have many antibodies on it, but each antibody is specific to that antigen. So it would match up with it perfectly. There's also something called memory cells. And basically, this means that they overproduce, the body overproduces T cells, that killer T cells that are specific to an antigen, and memory B cells that make the antibodies. So that the memory cells are what protects you the next time you are infected with that particular antigen or pathogen. So when the immune system is working appropriately, this is what it should look like. An insect stings someone in the arm. The mast cells infest the area, causing a leakage of capillary and inflammation. And you can see this. This is a perfect example. There's inflammation, and this redness is leakage from capillaries. The body does this to allow the larger macrophages to leave the circulatory system, go into the extracellular tissue, and destroy or phagocytize the antigen. Or it could be a pathogen, it could be an antigen. And that's, even though this looks like, oh, that's an allergic reaction, this is the appropriate allergic reaction so that within a few minutes, this will go away. So in one of the videos, it talks about pus, but in a situation like this, the macrophages would destroy this. It would get into the lymphatic tissue, back to the lymph nodes, and then be excreted from the body. This is a local allergic reaction. So, what is this? So this is an abnormal reaction. So these are highs. So what is going on here is mast cells and macrophages are going to not just to the specific site, but for some reason, and we'll talk about this when you do pathophysiology, they're releasing in multiple areas. And this is an abnormal immune reaction. The macrophages and the mast cells are releasing in areas where there are no antigens present. So really, that's all you need to know. You have stop sharing my screen. You'll have a 10-question assignment to do on this. And I think it's relatively simple. You can use any of the videos or this presentation to come up with those answers. And please submit them into D2L. Just in closing, I want to say that the immune system and allergic reactions are a big and an important part of your job as a paramedic. And having a base knowledge of why someone would get hives and what exactly they are is what you need to know to be a paramedic. So thank you for watching, and good luck.